Tristan was 36 years old, and for a man who guided $250 million container ships through the narrow channels of Mobile Bay for a living, his own life felt impossibly adrift. His salary as a maritime port pilot was a solid $73,000 a year, a source of quiet pride for a man whose work required a level of focus and calm few could comprehend. But that $73,000 felt like pocket change in the world his wife, Molly, had constructed around them. It was 4:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and the air in his 2018 Ford F-150, a truck he'd bought used for $26,500, was thick with the humid Alabama heat and the silent weight of the manila folder on the passenger seat. The folder was heavy, not with paper, but with 14 months of meticulous, soul-crushing truth. In 13 minutes, he and Molly had their 8th, and what he knew would be their final marriage counseling session with Dr. Hamilton. The session cost them $225 an hour, a fee Molly insisted was an investment in our future, but which Tristan knew was just another stage for her performance. For 7 weeks, he had sat on a plush, gray sofa in a sterile office on Dauphin Street, listening to Molly rewrite their entire 12-year history into a tragedy of her own making, with him as the charity case she had graciously saved. He had let her talk. He had nodded. He had said very little. But all the while, the folder grew heavier, fuller, a silent testament to the man she thought she had married, a simple, quiet man she'd long ago underestimated, and that, he knew, would be her ruin. He remembered the first time the word pity had left her lips in that office. It was their 3rd session. Molly, dressed in a $1,200 Diane von Furstenberg wrap dress that seemed to glow under the soft office lighting, had dabbed at a perfectly dry eye with a tissue. "Dr. Hamilton, you have to understand," she had said, her voice a practiced whisper of sorrow. "I love Tristan, I do. But our foundation, it was built on pity. I married him out of pity." Tristan had felt the therapist's eyes on him, a gentle, probing gaze. He had just looked at his hands, his calloused fingers resting on the knee of his $60 Dockers. He didn't react. He didn't argue. He just let the lie hang in the air, a poisonous vapor, and added its weight to the invisible file he was already building in his mind. He had no idea then how deep the betrayal went, but that one word, pity, was the key. It was the justification for everything she had done and everything she was about to do. What do you do when the person you've built your life with tells you, in front of a stranger, that your entire marriage was an act of charity? How do you react when you know it's not just a cruel distortion, but a calculated strategy? Do you scream? Do you cry? Do you walk out? Tristan did none of those things. He just sat there, a statue of quiet dignity, his deep brown skin absorbing the clinical light of the therapy room. He let her build her case, session after session, lie upon lie. He knew that a storm, no matter how powerful, eventually blows itself out, and he was not a storm. He was the lighthouse, fixed and steady, and he was about to guide this entire charade onto the rocks. He picked up the folder. It felt cool and solid in his hands. It was time. Their life in the sprawling 4-bedroom house in Spring Hill had become a master class in domestic facade. From the outside, it was a picture of black middle-class success, a $450,000 home with a perfectly manicured lawn that Tristan mowed himself every Saturday with their $350 John Deere mower, a gleaming white BMW 3 Series, a $43,000 car that was solely Molly's, sat in the driveway next to his functional Ford truck. Inside, the house was Molly's domain, a showroom of her aspirations. The living room was dominated by a white leather sectional sofa she'd ordered from Pottery Barn for $6,800, a piece so pristine Tristan was almost afraid to sit on it. On the wall hung a massive abstract painting she'd bought at a local gallery for $3,500, all slashes of gray and gold that she claimed represented the complexities of modern love. To Tristan, it just looked expensive and cold. He remembered a Saturday morning about 2 years ago, long before the therapy sessions began. He was in the kitchen, making his simple breakfast of toast and 2 eggs, the smell of coffee filling the air. He was wearing his favorite worn-out Howard University sweatshirt, a faded memento from a college he'd worked 2 jobs to get through. Molly walked in, already dressed for a brunch with her friends. She was wearing a silk blouse that probably cost more than his monthly truck payment and a pair of $900 Jimmy Choo heels that clicked menacingly on the polished hardwood floors. She looked at him, her gaze sweeping from his sweatshirt down to his bare feet, and a small, tight smile played on her lips. "You know, babe," she began, pouring herself a glass of filtered water from the $800 Samsung smart fridge. "My friends were asking what you do again. I tried to explain it, the whole ship pilot thing. But it just sounds so blue collar." Tristan took a slow bite of his toast. He knew what she was doing. It was a game she played, subtly diminishing him to elevate herself. "I guide multi-million-dollar vessels into port, Molly. It's a bit more complicated than that." I know, she said, waving a dismissive hand, her $15,000 diamond wedding ring flashing in the morning light. "It's just, when Candace talks about her husband, the cardiologist, or when Simone talks about hers, the investment banker, it's just a different world. Their husbands manage portfolios. You manage tides." She laughed, a light, airy sound that didn't reach her eyes. "Don't worry, I made you sound very heroic. The brave man of the sea." He felt a familiar, dull ache in his chest. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was a profound sense of exhaustion. Every detail of their life was a transaction, a point of comparison. The wondered 20-a-plate dinners she insisted on, the $5,000 vacations to resorts where she could take Instagram photos, the constant stream of packages from Net-a-Porter and Saks Fifth Avenue arriving at their door. It was all funded by his steady, reliable paycheck and the joint savings account he had diligently contributed to since they were married. An account he believed was for their future, for children, for a comfortable retirement. He had no idea how wrong he was. That joint account was her personal slush fund, a war chest for a battle he didn't even know was coming. The facade was perfect, polished, and expensive, and he was starting to realize he was the one paying for it in more ways than one. The cruelty began as a series of small cuts, tiny lacerations to his spirit that were easy to dismiss as misunderstandings or bad moods, but over time they formed a pattern, a deliberate campaign of emotional erosion. The betrayal escalated in the months leading up to her suggestion of therapy. It was no longer just about snide comments. It became a public performance. One evening, they were at a dinner party at the home of one of Molly's friends, Candace, the one married to the cardiologist. The house was an architectural marvel in a gated community, all glass and steel, a place that probably cost north of $1.5 million. Tristan felt out of place in his best $400 suit from Men's Warehouse, surrounded by men in custom-tailored Italian jackets that cost 10 times as much. The conversation turned to investments. The cardiologist, a man named David, was holding forth on his recent successes in the tech sector. "We cleared over $200,000 last quarter on a single stock," he boasted, swirling a glass of what Tristan knew was a $300 bottle of wine. Molly, seated beside Tristan, placed a perfectly manicured hand on his arm. She smiled sweetly at the group. "Oh, that's wonderful for you, David. Tristan and I are much more conservative. Our biggest investment is in his pension." She said the word pension as if it were a quaint, dusty antique. A polite, slightly condescending silence fell over the table. "Tristan is a port pilot," Molly continued, her voice taking on a tone of patient explanation, as if describing a rare but harmless insect. It's a government job, very secure, very stable. The implication was clear. It was also very small. Tristan felt the heat rise in his neck. He could feel the eyes of the other guests on him, a mixture of pity and curiosity. He wanted to explain the years of training, the immense responsibility, the fact that a single miscalculation on his part could cause an environmental and economic disaster worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But he knew it would be useless. Molly had already framed him. He was the simple, stable husband, the anchor holding back her magnificent ship. Later that night, in the car on the way home, the silence was thick. "Why do you do that, Molly?" he finally asked, his voice low. "Do what?" she asked, feigning innocence as she checked her reflection in the visor mirror. "Diminish me." "Why do you talk about my job like it's something to be ashamed of?" She sighed, a long, theatrical exhalation of frustration. "Oh, Tristan, don't be so sensitive. I was just being honest. We are not in their league. I have made my peace with that. I thought you had too. I was just managing expectations." Managing expectations? Or managing my reputation down to nothing? "It's not my fault that you chose a career with a ceiling," she snapped, her voice suddenly sharp as glass. "I support you. I stand by you. But do not ask me to pretend that guiding a boat is the same as saving a life or managing a billion-dollar fund. It's just not." That was the night he started sleeping a little less soundly. That was the night the first seed of a terrible suspicion was planted. She wasn't just embarrassed by him. She was actively undermining him. It was a strategy. But for what? He didn't know yet. The therapy sessions were the culmination of her campaign. In that controlled environment, with a professional witness, she could finally codify the narrative she had been building for years. In their second session, she cried, real tears this time. "I had so many ambitions, doctor," she sobbed, twisting a handkerchief in her lap. "I was accepted into law school at Vanderbilt. But Tristan, he needed me. He was so lost after his mother passed away. He was working 2 jobs, just trying to stay afloat. I gave up my dream for him. I chose him." It was a brilliant lie constructed around a kernel of truth. Tristan's mother, his beloved mama, had passed away a year before he met Molly. He had been grieving, yes, but lost? Never. He was working 2 jobs because he was saving for the down payment on their first home, a modest $150,000 bungalow in a quiet neighborhood. He had encouraged her to go to law school, offered to work a 3rd job to support them. She was the one who had declined, saying she wasn't cut out for that kind of stress. Now, in this room, she had transformed her own lack of ambition into a noble sacrifice she had made for him. And then came the most brutal session, the one before he found the first piece of hard evidence. She looked directly at him, her eyes cold and clear. "We all know I married you out of pity, Tristan. Even my own family said I was settling. They said I was throwing my life away on a man with no family, no money, and no connections. But I saw something in you, a goodness. I thought I could build you up. I thought my love would be enough to make you more." Each word was a hammer blow. He felt the air leave his lungs. Dr. Hamilton looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Tristan," she said gently, "how does that make you feel?" He looked at his wife, the woman who had shared his bed for 12 years, and for the first time he saw a complete stranger, a cold, calculating stranger who was methodically dismantling his identity, his history, his worth, right in front of him. He felt nothing. A terrifying, liberating numbness washed over him. The ache in his chest was gone, replaced by a crystalline certainty. This wasn't a marriage in trouble. This was a demolition, and he was standing at ground zero. He simply said, I hear what she's saying. He didn't know it yet, but the war had already begun, and her declaration was his call to arms. The discovery happened on a rainy Tuesday night, exactly 14 months before that final therapy session. The date was etched into his memory. November 12th. The rhythmic drumming of the rain against the windows of their Spring Hill home was a soothing sound, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside him. Molly was out at what she called her book club, a weekly gathering with her friends that Tristan had long suspected was more about expensive wine and gossip than literature. He was in his home office, a small, cluttered room that was his only real sanctuary in the house, trying to reconcile their monthly budget. It was an exercise in futility he performed every month. His steady $73,000 salary, which broke down to about $4,500 a month after taxes, was consistently overwhelmed by their expenses. The mortgage on the $450,000 house was $2,200. The payment on her $43,000 BMW was $650, utilities, groceries, and her credit card bills. It never added up. He was staring at the statement for their joint savings account, the one he thought was their nest egg. The balance was shockingly low, just $7,800. He knew for a fact it should have been closer to $50,000. He had been automatically transferring $500 a month into it for 10 years. A knot of ice formed in his stomach. He clicked through the transaction history. He saw the regular deposits from his paycheck, and then he saw the withdrawals. Dozens of them. Transfers of $2,000, $3,500, $5,000 at a time, all made out to an account number he didn't recognize. The description simply read, "Investment transfer." His hands started to tremble slightly. He opened another browser tab and logged into Molly's personal email account, something he had never done in their entire marriage. The password was the name of her childhood pet, a name he remembered from a story she'd told him years ago. He felt a pang of guilt, a feeling of violating her privacy that was quickly overwhelmed by a cold, rising dread. He searched for the unfamiliar account number from the bank statement. An email popped up. It was from a private wealth management firm in Atlanta. The subject line was Confirmation of Asset Transfer, Act Shermir 7 and 8B. He clicked it open. The email confirmed a transfer of $15,000 into a private investment account, an account held solely in the name of Malia Jeanette Davies, her maiden name. He scrolled down and saw a chain of previous emails, statements, financial summaries. For over 3 years, Molly had been systematically draining their joint savings and funneling the money into a secret account. He did a quick, shaky calculation. Based on the statements, the account held over $182,000. It was a staggering sum, built from the money he believed they were saving together. He felt dizzy. He leaned back in his worn $150 office chair, the leather creaking under his weight. The rain beat against the glass, each drop a tiny hammer against his shattered reality. It wasn't just about the money, it was the deception, the years of lies. The way she would kiss him goodbye in the morning, her lips still warm as she headed off to a life he knew nothing about. The way she would complain about being broke, while secretly sitting on a fortune he had earned. Just then his phone buzzed. It was a text from her. "Book club running late. Don't wait up, sweetie. Love you, XOXO." He stared at the glowing screen, at the casual lie typed out in pixels. He felt a cold clarity wash over him, the kind of absolute focus he felt in the pilot tower during a storm, guiding a massive ship through a treacherous channel. The hurt was there, a deep, searing wound. But beneath it, something else was taking shape: resolve. He took a screenshot of the email. He downloaded the bank statements. He created a new, password-protected folder on his computer desktop. He named it simply Evidence. The sound of the rain was no longer soothing. It was the sound of a clock starting to tick. The 14 months that followed were the longest of Tristan's life. He was living a double existence, a quiet, methodical spy in his own home. On the surface, he was the same Tristan. The dutiful husband who took out the trash, who listened to her stories about brunch, who rubbed her feet after a long day. He played the part of the simple, slightly oblivious man she believed him to be. But beneath that placid surface, a different man was at work. A man who was gathering, documenting, and preparing. Each lie she told was a scene he had to endure, a performance he had to applaud while dying inside. He remembered one dinner, about 6 months into his secret investigation. She was lamenting their financial situation, a common theme of hers. "I saw the most beautiful $2,400 Burberry trench coat today," she sighed, pushing a piece of salmon around her plate. "But of course we can't afford it. We have to be so careful." Tristan just nodded, sipping his water. "Maybe next year, babe." Inside, he was thinking about the $4,500 transfer he'd seen her make to her secret account just 2 days prior. The hypocrisy was so brazen, it was almost breathtaking. He had to physically restrain himself from calling her out, from throwing the bank statement on the dinner table. But he knew, with the cold certainty of a pilot reading a chart, that a premature move would ruin everything. He needed more. He needed an airtight case. He became an expert in digital forensics. He used a simple, undetectable software to recover deleted text messages from their shared cloud account. The conversations between Molly and her sister Simone were a goldmine. "Simone, he still has no idea about the Atlanta account?" "Molly, please." "Tristan thinks an IRA is a terrorist group. He wouldn't know a brokerage account if it bit him." "Simone, LOL. You're savage. When are you finally going to pull the plug?" "Molly, soon. I'm building my case. The pity angle is working wonders with the therapist. By the time I'm done, he'll be so beaten down, he'll be grateful to walk away with his rusty truck." He read the words on his phone screen at 2:17 a.m., sitting in that same truck in the deserted parking lot of a 24-hour grocery store. The casual cruelty of it, the dismissal of him as a fool, it didn't even hurt anymore. It was just data. Exhibit C. His most audacious move came a few months later. He knew from her texts that she often spoke to Simone on the phone while driving her BMW, using the car's Bluetooth system. He bought a tiny, voice-activated audio recorder, a $60 device the size of a thumb drive, and tucked it deep inside the passenger side sun visor. It was a long shot, but it paid off. 2 weeks later, he retrieved the device. He sat in his office, headphones on, and listened. Her voice, clear and crisp, filled his ears. She was laughing with her sister. "And then in therapy, I told him I gave up law school for him. The look on his face, Sim? And Dr. Hamilton just ate it up, writing everything down. This is going to be the easiest divorce in history. The judge will see me as the poor, long-suffering wife who married a charity case. I'll get the house, spousal support. I'll get everything. He's too simple to fight back." Tristan paused the recording. He took a long, slow breath. He felt no rage, only a profound, chilling calm. She had made a critical mistake. She thought his quietness was weakness. She thought his kindness was stupidity. She had no idea who she was dealing with. He saved the audio file, labeled it Exhibit D Spousal Demolition Strategy, and dropped it into the growing folder. He was playing dumb, but he was learning everything. He was a pilot, and he knew that to navigate a storm, you had to understand every current, every wind, every hidden reef, and he was charting her every move. His first meeting with Vera Hayes was on a Thursday afternoon. Her office was in a modest, red brick building downtown, a world away from the gleaming glass towers where Molly's imagined future husbands worked. Ms. Hayes was a sharp, no-nonsense black woman in her 50s with a warm smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her eyes were all business. Her fee was $450 an hour, a price that made Tristan flinch, but he knew he couldn't afford anything less than the best. He sat across from her at a large mahogany desk, the manila folder placed squarely between them. "Mr. Davies," she began, her voice calm and direct, "you said on the phone that your wife is preparing to divorce you and that you have evidence of financial misconduct. Tell me everything." For the next hour, Tristan spoke. He laid out the last 14 months of his life with the same dispassionate precision he used to describe a ship's passage plan. He told her about the therapy sessions, Molly's pity narrative, the public humiliations. Then he opened the folder. He showed her the bank statements from their joint account, with the fraudulent transfers highlighted in yellow. Total drained from joint savings, $7,500. He showed her the printouts of the statements from the secret Atlanta account, showing a current balance of $182,341.17. He showed her the recovered text messages between Molly and her sister, each one a testament to her premeditated scheme. Finally, he took out a small USB drive. "This is an audio recording," he said, his voice even. "It's from 2 weeks ago. It's my wife, speaking with her sister, detailing her plan to use the therapy sessions to paint me as a charity case, so she can get the house and spousal support in the divorce." Vera Hayes put on a pair of reading glasses and spent the next 20 minutes silently reading through the documents. She occasionally made a small note on a yellow legal pad. When she was done, she took off her glasses and looked at him. The business-like facade had melted away, replaced by a look of profound respect and a flicker of cold anger on his behalf. "Mr. Davies," she said, her voice low, "this is not evidence. This is a nuke. In my 25 years of practicing family law, I have rarely seen a case this thorough. The premeditation is staggering." She leaned forward. "So here's what we're going to do. You will continue to play the part of the unsuspecting husband. You will attend the next therapy session. You will let her say whatever she's going to say. You will not react. You will not argue. You will let her dig her own grave. And then, and only then, you will respond." "What do I say?" Tristan asked. "You will say 3 words. I have everything. And then you will give Dr. Hamilton a copy of this folder. The next morning at 9 a.m. sharp, we will file for divorce. We will file for an emergency court order to freeze all her assets, including the secret account. We will petition for you to be awarded the house, given that her entire case for support is built on fraud, which we can now prove." She calculated the figures on her notepad. She has committed marital fraud to the tune of over $182,000. She has engaged in a conspiracy to defraud you. We will not be settling, Mr. Davies. We will be dictating terms. Tristan felt a weight lift from his shoulders, a burden he hadn't even realized he was carrying. For the first time in over a year, he wasn't alone. He had a plan. He had an ally. He paid her a $5,000 retainer from his personal savings, the last of his emergency fund. It was the best money he had ever spent. He walked out of her office into the bright mobile sunshine, the empty manila folder in his hand, feeling like a man who could finally see the harbor lights after a long, treacherous journey through the fog. The therapy office felt different this time. Colder. Smaller. It was Tuesday, 5:01 p.m. The plush, gray sofa felt like a block of ice beneath Tristan. Mally was already seated when he arrived, a vision of calculated sorrow. She wore a simple but elegant black dress, a $950 piece from a designer he couldn't name. Her hair, a cascade of intricate braids, was pulled back, emphasizing the somber expression on her face. She looked like a grieving widow. Dr. Hamilton began the session with her usual calm demeanor. "Molly, Tristan, welcome. Molly, in our last session, you were discussing the origins of your relationship. Would you like to continue from there?" Molly nodded, taking a deep, shaky breath. She turned to Tristan, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. This was it, the final performance. "Tristan," she began, her voice a fragile whisper, "I need you to hear this. I need you to truly understand. I have carried this burden for 12 years, and I can't do it anymore." She looked at Dr. Hamilton. "Doctor, I love him, but I have enabled him. By protecting him from the world, by building this beautiful life for him." She gestured around vaguely as if the therapy office was part of their $450,000 home. "I have stopped him from growing. He's still the same lost boy I met all those years ago. A good man, a simple man, but a man I had to rescue." Tristan remained perfectly still. He let her words wash over him, feeling nothing but the smooth, cool edge of the folder in his lap. It was a copy of the one he had given his lawyer, filled with pristine duplicates of every piece of evidence. "I married you out of pity," she said, her voice gaining strength, turning now from sorrow to a kind of righteous declaration. "We all know it. My family knows it. My friends know it. And deep down, I think you know it too. I thought I could love you enough to make you my equal. But I was wrong. And it is not fair to either of us to continue this charity." She sat back, her performance complete. The air in the room was thick with the weight of her pronouncement. She had laid her final card on the table, confident it was the ace. She expected him to crumble, to argue, to deny, to give her something, anything, to work with. Dr. Hamilton turned her gentle, therapeutic gaze to him. "Tristan," she said softly, "this is a very difficult thing to hear. What is your response?" Tristan looked at Molly. He looked at the woman who had shared his life, the woman who had just publicly and with meticulous cruelty attempted to erase him. He saw the flicker of triumph in her eyes, the smug certainty of a battle won. He took a slow breath. He did not raise his voice. He did not betray a single flicker of emotion. He simply looked her directly in the eye and said the 3 words Vera Hayes had given him. "I have everything." The words hung in the air, quiet, simple, and utterly devastating. Molly's brow furrowed in confusion. "What? What are you talking about? Everything what?" Tristan didn't answer her. He leaned forward and placed the thick manila folder on the polished cherry wood coffee table between them. He slid it across the smooth surface until it stopped directly in front of Dr. Hamilton. The therapist looked from Tristan's calm, unreadable face to the folder. She looked at Molly, whose smug expression was now morphing into one of bewilderment and dawning unease. With a slow, deliberate movement, Dr. Hamilton reached out and set her pen down on her notepad. The small click of plastic on paper was the loudest sound Tristan had ever heard. She opened the folder. Her eyes scanned the first page, a summary sheet Vera had prepared, listing the contents. Exhibit A, financial statements, marital fraud. Exhibit B, text message records, conspiracy. Exhibit C, audio recording transcript, admission of fraudulent intent. Tristan watched as every trace of color drained from Molly's face. Her luminous, deep brown skin turned a sickly, ashen gray. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. The mask of the grieving, benevolent wife shattered, revealing the panicked, cornered schemer beneath. Dr. Hamilton read for another 30 seconds, her expression shifting from professional neutrality to undisguised shock. She looked up, not at Molly, but at Tristan. She saw him then, truly saw him for the first time. Not as the simple, pitiable husband from Molly's narrative, but as a man of immense patience, precision, and unbreakable resolve. She closed the folder. "I believe," she said, her voice now crisp and devoid of its therapeutic warmth, "that this session is over, and I believe I will be subpoenaed as a witness. My professional opinion is that one party has been acting in profound bad faith. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a world ending. Molly stared at the folder as if it were a snake, her entire, carefully constructed reality undone by a simple collection of paper and a single audio file. Tristan stood up. He had said all he needed to say. He walked out of the office, leaving the folder, the lies, and the woman who was now his past behind him in the ruins. The consequences cascaded with brutal, systematic efficiency. The following morning, at precisely 9 a.m., Vera Hayes filed the divorce petition and the emergency motion to freeze Molly's assets. By 11:30 a.m., a judge had signed the order. Molly found out when she tried to use her debit card to buy a $6 latte at the Starbucks on Airport Boulevard. Declined. She tried her credit card. Declined. In a panic, she logged into her secret Atlanta brokerage account on her phone. Across the screen, in bold red letters, was the message, "Account frozen by court order." The 182-341-17 was inaccessible. Her first call was to Tristan, a frantic, shrieking voicemail. "What did you do? What was in that folder? You are trying to ruin me. This is my money. You can't do this." Her second call was to her sister, Simone. That conversation must have been short and terrifying, because Simone's lawyer called Vera Hayes an hour later, offering full cooperation in exchange for immunity from any potential civil conspiracy charges. Simone had folded instantly, choosing self-preservation over sisterly loyalty. The first legal letter arrived at Molly's new address, a cramped one-bedroom apartment she was renting for $200 a month 2 days later. It was from Vera Hayes, and it laid out the terms. They were not a negotiation, they were a verdict. Because she had engaged in marital fraud, she would forfeit any claim to the marital home. The $450,000 house and the equity they had built in it was Tristan's. Her $43,000 BMW was a marital asset purchased with joint funds. It would be sold, and the proceeds would go to Tristan to partially reimburse the $6,700 she had stolen from their savings. She would be entitled to zero spousal support, as her entire claim was based on a fraudulent narrative she had constructed, the evidence of which was now a court record. Her high-powered, 800-an-hour lawyer took one look at the evidence folder Vera sent over and immediately advised her to accept the terms. There was no defense. The audio recording alone was enough to destroy her credibility. Her legal bill for that one piece of advice was $3,200. The social fallout was just as swift. The story, stripped of Molly's narrative and laid bare by the facts in the court filing, spread through her circle of friends like wildfire. She was no longer the tragic, noble heroine. She was a thief and a liar. Candace, the cardiologist's wife, stopped returning her calls. The invitations to brunch and charity galas evaporated. She was ostracized, her social standing collapsing overnight. The world she had prized so highly, the world for which she had sacrificed her marriage and her integrity, had slammed its door in her face. The final, most devastating consequence was the loss of her own history. The lies she had told for so long had become her truth. Stripped of them, she had nothing left. She had defined herself in opposition to Tristan, as smarter, more ambitious, more sophisticated. But without him as a foil, who was she? Just a woman in a cheap apartment with a mountain of debt and a future built on nothing. She had tried to demolish him, but in the end, the only life she had managed to destroy was her own. 2 years later, the house in Spring Hill was quieter, but it felt more like a home than it ever had when Molly lived there. The oppressive white leather sectional was gone, sold for $1,500 on Facebook Marketplace. In its place was a comfortable, well-worn sofa Tristan had bought for $800 from a local furniture store. The cold, abstract painting was gone, replaced by a beautiful, large-scale nautical chart of Mobile Bay that had cost him $300 to frame. The house was his now, filled with things that brought him peace. Tristan's life had found a new, steady rhythm. He was still a port pilot, his $73,000 salary now more than enough for his needs. He had been promoted to a senior training position, mentoring the next generation of pilots. He found a deep, unexpected joy in it, sharing the knowledge and calm that were his greatest assets. His mentees, young men and women with eager eyes, looked at him with a respect that was genuine, earned not through money or status, but through competence and character. His deep brown skin was often luminous in the afternoon light filtering into the pilot tower as he patiently explained the complexities of wind and tide. On Sundays, he sailed. He had bought a small, used 22-foot sailboat, a Catalina he named the Steady Hand, for $8,500. It was his sanctuary. He would spend hours out on Mobile Bay, the sun on his face, the wind in the sails, feeling the quiet hum of the world operating as it should. There was no pretense on the water, no facade. There was only the wind, the tide, and the skill of the sailor. It was honest. He rarely thought of Molly. He had heard through the grapevine that she had moved to Birmingham and was working as a paralegal, trying to rebuild her life. He harbored no ill will towards her. Vera Hayes had called his approach accountability, not revenge, and the phrase had stuck with him. He had forgiven her, not for her sake, but for his. Forgiving was how he had let go of the anchor of bitterness that could have drowned him. One sunny afternoon, out on the bay, with the skyline of Mobile a distant silhouette, he thought about true wealth. He once thought it was about the numbers in a bank account, the price tag on a car, the square footage of a house. Molly had certainly believed that, but she had ended up with nothing. He looked around at the sparkling water, felt the gentle rocking of his boat, and thought of the young pilots he was helping to shape. He realized true wealth wasn't something you could own or spend. It was the peace in your own home. It was the respect you earned from your work. It was the quiet joy of a Sunday sail. It was a life built not on what you had, but on who you were. And for the first time in a very long time, Tristan Davies felt like the richest man in the world. He was the captain of his own life, finally sailing in clear, open water. What do you think is the truest measure of a person's wealth? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And for more stories about overcoming betrayal and finding true strength, be sure to like and subscribe to Love Beyond Pride.